there we go. Wow, thank you so much. Thank you. And Cornelius and Sarah just gave me a copy of the book that they made for me with Cornelius's poems, Cave Canem poems. Thank you so much. I love you guys so much. Okay, I wasn't going to read from my new poems, but I am going to read from my new poems because of the fellows here. I did want to start out by reading a poem for Bruce Derricotte, who died Tuesday night, and the Black Notebooks is dedicated to him, and we were together during the 20 years in which I wrote the Black Notebooks. Not forgotten. I love the way the black ants use their dead. They carry them off like warriors on their steel backs. They spend hours struggling, lifting, dragging. It is not grisly as it would be for us to carry them back to be eaten, so that every part will be of service. I think of my husband at his father's grave. The grass had closed over the headstone, and the name had disappeared. He took out his pocket knife and cut the grass away. He swept it with his handkerchief to make it clear. Is this the way we'll be forgotten? And he bent down over the grave and wept. The new book is called The Undertaker's Daughter, and it begins with an epigraph from George Seferis. The dreadful war nature wages to prevent the poet from existing. I'm going to sort of have to excise chunks because it goes together. It's a long thing, but I tried to give a sense of the flow. I am not afraid to be memoir. Before the amphetamine of accomplishment, when there was only a physical body and a mind circulating through it like blood, with hardly a hovering angel, chunky, spirited, too big for her britches, on the two-wheeler before the grown-ups rose, driving the neighbors crazy on Sunday morning when the neighborhood should be quiet. God, yeah. First tendency to test legs and eyes, standing up on the seat with one leg out behind her, one or two hands on the handlebars, like a circus lady riding back bareback, back to loneliness, back before angels separated and became the mad god. I want to go back there without a platform except that rising of the body itself, that challenge up to being. I want to go back to where the first and last wisdom forms, the secret self locked in the tentative field of protoplasm, whatever was cooled and cooked on the rock, whatever mitochondria God stuck his thumb in, back. I am not afraid to be memoir. Burial sites. This is the first section of the book. A quote from Peter Levine. Trauma is not what happens to us, but what we hold inside us in the absence of an empathetic witness. 1. The first was a bassinet. I don't remember what it was made of. I think it was one of those big white wicker baskets with wheels. When I couldn't sleep at night, my father would drag it into the kitchen. It was winter. He'd liked the gas oven. I remember the room's stuffiness, the acrid bite of cold and fumes. My father didn't like crying. He said I was doing it to get attention. He didn't like my mother teaching me that I could cry and get attention. Nothing was wrong with me. And even if I was hungry, it wasn't time to eat. Sometimes I screamed for hours, and my father, I do remember this, would push his chair up to the lip of the bassinet and smoke, as if he were keeping me company. After a few nights, he had broken me. I stopped crying, but when he put the bottle to my lips, I didn't want it. I was too exhausted to drink. 3. My aunt brought home a present for me every day when she came from work. I'd wait by the kitchen door as soon as I could walk. Sometimes she'd fish down in her pocketbook, and the only thing she could find was a Tums, which she called candy. But mostly, bad trick, but mostly she'd bring colored paper and pencils from the printing press where she worked. When I was 2 or 3, I began to draw things and to write my name. I wrote it backward for a long time, I-O-T. I drew houses, cars, money, and animals. I actually believed everything I drew was real. The house was a real house, as real as the one we lived in. I held it in my hand. It belonged to me, like a chair or an apple. From then on, I did not understand my mother's sadness or my father's rage. If we could have whatever we wanted just by drawing it, there was nothing to miss or to long for. I tried to show them what I meant, but they shrugged it off, not seeing or believing. This sideways escape, the battle between my father's worst thought of me and this proof, this stream of something, questioned and found lacking, which must remain nearly invisible, pressed into what leaks out as involuntarily as urine, a message which must be passed over the coals, raked, purified into a thin strand of unambiguous essence of the deep core. Most times I liked my food. I didn't mind eating until my daddy started making me clean my plate and either struck me off my chair if I didn't, or lifted me up by my hair and held me midair if I was slow. He wanted me to eat faster. He didn't have all day. He'd hold me up off the floor until I pleaded. I'd sputter in fear and humiliation. I don't remember pain, but I had to button up before he put me down to do exactly what he had told me to do, fast. Slowness was a sign of insubordination. If I missed a pea or a crumb, I was trying to outwit him. I must have thought he was stupid, and if I pleaded that I hadn't seen the pea, he'd know I was lying. Your story is so touching till it sounds like a lie. I swallowed it down. I wiped that look off my face, but still he would notice my bottom lip beginning to quiver. This was a personal insult, as if I had taken a knife and put it to his face. If my brow wrinkled in a question, "Do you love me, Daddy? How could you hurt me like this?" This implied I was pursuing my own version of the truth, as if I were his victim. It was a war of wills, as he so clearly saw, and these were my attempts to subvert him, to make my will reign, to plant my flag. He was the ruler of my body. I had to learn that. He had to be deep in me, deeper than instinct, like the commander of a submarine during times of war. 8. I am trying to get as close as possible to the place in me where the change occurred. I had to take that voice in, become my father, the judge referred to before any dangerous self-assertion, any thought or feeling. I happened in reverse. My body took in the pummeling actions which went down into my core. I asked myself first, before any love or joy or passion, anything that might grow from me, who do you think you are? I suppressed the possibilities. You would think that one treated so cruelly would kill the abuser, throw him out of the brain forever. What a horrific irony that the abuser is the one most taken in, most remembered. The imprint of those who were loving and kind is secondary, like a passing cloud. Sometimes I thought that's why my father beat me, because he was afraid he would be forgotten, and he achieved what he wanted. In the deepest place of judgment, not critical thinking, not on that high plane, but judgment of the first waking, judgment of the sort that decides what inner face to turn toward the morning. In that first choosing moment of what to say to myself, the place from which first language blossoms. I choose, must choose, my father's words. The twisted snarl of his unbelief turned everything good into something undeserved, so that nothing convinces enough. No man or woman or child, no play or work or art. There is no inner loyalty, no way of belonging. I cannot trust what I feel and connect to. I cannot love or hold anything in my hand, any fragile thing, a living blue egg, my own baby, in the same way that I never convinced my father I was his, and I must rest on it as on bedrock. The second part of the book is about writing and how writing produces change. I see my father after his death. I caught a plane at about 11 in the morning, and we were at the funeral home at about 2. My father had been dead about 10 hours. We had chosen the mortician who had been my grandfather's old competitor, whose son, unlike my father, had stayed in the family business. I wanted to see my father before he was ready, but the mortician didn't want to take me back. He talked about germs, about me washing my hands after. I didn't know if he was afraid of my emotions, that I would burst into uncontrollable tears, or if there was something back there he didn't want me to see. Maybe it was dirty, or maybe it just wasn't the rule. So often people can't break the rules. I persuaded him. It was clean, like an old-fashioned kitchen, with tile and stainless steel sinks and counters. There was a huge blue bottle in the corner with a siphon in it, a black and white tile floor. It looked efficient, not spiffed up, like his French provincial waiting room. Then I came upon my father, swaddled in a layer of linen, zipped in plastic and bound with tape. His face the only part of him visible. The color was pure, as if he had been drained of age and illness. That look of dark acceptance, that fixed stare that penetrated without hope or understanding had been left behind. There was a softness I had never seen before, his forehead unlined and smooth. He had been given a second beauty as a death gift. The monster had flown out on its hard, dark wings and left behind not a shell, but one tortured a lifetime and released. The night my father died, I had a dream, suddenly as if I had just been born and didn't know anything before that. I didn't feel fear. Nothing else had happened, just that fear had been sucked out of me. And I didn't even remember it happening, but just felt gratitude for an absence that made my life, I swear I am not making a metaphor, feel like heaven. But as the night went on, a worry began to encroach, a sliver of gray. What if this fearlessness were taken away? When I woke, I felt such joy. I shook my husband and said, "I'm free, I'm different." And I began to put my feet over the side of the bed as if the ground were coming up to meet me. At that moment, when my feet touched the floor, something in me said, "Your father is dead." And I knew why I felt so happy. I had forgotten that moment until today, that happiness that had tarnished like silver, like an old, old mirror in which I could no longer see my face. I don't know why I lost it, why that heaviness came back. For wasn't my father truly dead? Didn't I no longer have to fear him? But in a few days, the wonder faded. My mind was not ready for such light. I had to dig my way out of darkness, one weighty grain at a time. It was as if a memory of the future had visited. And these are just the two last that I'll read in from the third part of the book. When the goddess makes love to me. Thank you, darling. When the goddess makes love to me, She has to pass through my father. She has to find him where he sits in a corner inside me, cold as a turd. I can't reach him anymore. I don't have the strength to yank him out and blow on his breast. She has to tuck her fingers between his thighs and warm him slowly. First the shoulders and the tops of his arms. She has to coax the crying boy to come through the dead, walking on tiptoe. Sometimes he can't find his way, feeling in the dark with his blunt fingers. And sometimes he stands there, dumbstruck, his body trembling between us like a little bird's. And the last one. The poem is change. The poem in change. The end of the poem is change. To change in the poem. To change by the poem. To hold the change in the poem. To be changed by the poem. The poem is change. To change by writing the poem. The writing is change. To hold the change in the writing. To hold the change by writing. To breathe through the change. To write through the change. To breathe by writing. To write by breathing. To change by breathing. The change is breathing. To hold the breath. To hold the writing. To hold the change. To hold it and let it go.